Hey, what's up, Raider Nation? Around this time of year, there's a lot of dumb rumors that start floating around. We're going to get to a couple of them on today's show.
What's up, Raider Nation? Professor Kennedy here. There are a lot of alluring jobs out there in the NFL, and there's a lot of notable coaches that are available. We'll talk about it on the SWAT show.
Raider Nation, what's happening? Q Myers here. Mark Davis, Tom Brady, John Spytek, all in Miami for the national championship game. Fernando Mania, let it begin. We got that here on the Raider Squad Show. Let's get it.
Raider Nation, it's time. This is the Raiders Squad. Everything Las Vegas Raiders every week. Covering all the big hits and game-changing plays from the Death Star in the desert. The way only the Locked On Podcast Network can. Commitment to excellence starts here. The Raiders Squad Show starts now.
Hey, what's good, Raider Nation? Remember, if you like the content, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button. You can also follow us on our social media channels. You'll see in the description below the ways that you can connect with us. We also just want to say thanks so much for helping the show grow, the channel grow. So if you make Locked On Raiders your first listen of the day and then the Squad Show your second listen of the day, we do appreciate you. You can also find us on the audio side as well. So wherever you find your shows and podcasts, we're available there as well. And if you got a couple of minutes, leave a rate and review because that also helps the channel grow. And as I always say, give us a 5-star because Q and Link are on the show. Now, lots to get into. Remember, in that final segment, as we always do, if you're watching this on YouTube, it's questions and comments with Link and Q. So you can get your questions and comments in. If you're watching this on another time, maybe another time, or maybe you're listening to it in your car, you can always reach out to us on YouTube or Twitter, and we might be able to get to your questions and comments on another show. So we're going to get into that in that final segment, as we always do. In that third segment, we're going to talk about a rumor that's been floating around. Is it dumb or could it happen? We're going to talk about it because there's a lot of dumb rumors floating around this time of year. We're also going to talk about Sean McDermott and the Bills because obviously that is huge news as well. We're going to talk about the coaching search. And of course, we can not talk about Fernando Mania, right? Because everybody was there at the game. I'm talking about silver and black. But let's start off with a couple of coaching updates because that's probably what Raider Nation wants to know for now. Who's going to be the next Raiders head coach? And so far, some chips have fallen in terms of other coaches being hired elsewhere. And this kind of happened just after the national championship game. Robert Saleh and the Titans have agreed to a deal. I think they're still finalizing some of the terms, but he's heading to Tennessee. Obviously, the Giants and John Harbaugh. Falcons, Kevin Stefanski, Dolphins, Jeff Hafley. The Raiders were supposed to have an interview with Hafley on Wednesday. That's obviously not going to happen anymore. But they also did interview Mike McDaniel in Miami, and that was kind of interesting. And that, I believe, that was for the head coaching position. So why don't we just start right there? Were you guys surprised that Mike McDaniel was interviewed for the head coaching position? Because I think a lot of people are thinking he might get an OC job somewhere, but it seems like the Raiders are very interested in him. Q, will go with you first.
Yeah, I was kind of surprised because I thought exactly what you said. I thought that he was going to get an OC job, and most likely he probably will get an OC job sometime in this cycle. But I was surprised to see it. But then again, they were in Miami, and so they interviewed him in person. So, why not pick his brain? And look, I would be intrigued by Coach McDaniel. It's so funny, man. I remember when Josh McDaniels was the head coach, and everyone said we got the wrong McDaniel because Mike was in Miami doing some pretty big things, and he's a very sharp, offensive mind. I would be interested in him, in especially seeing what his staff would look like, right? Who would he put together? There was one thing I didn't like about what he did in Miami. He never conditioned his team and prepared his team to be a tough enough team to go into the elements and play. And I get it. They play in Miami, so you don't get too many elements there. The weather is always fantastic, but you have to understand in that division, you have to be able to go into the cold weather and win games. And that was the one thing you could bet on it. And I'm sure you probably did, Shantelle, as you're our degenerate here in a loving way on the show. But you could always bet on that. If they're going to go play in a cold weather game, they were going to lose just because they were never conditioned. I always felt like they were a much more like finesse team than a tough team. So I'd be interested in him as a head coach because he's a very sharp offensive mind. Would love to see what his staff that he would put around him. And then the good thing about that, if he were to become the head coach, and again, this is just a hypothetical, if he were to become the head coach, at least you know that he wasn't going to be leaving for another head coaching opportunity like he would if he were to get, say, the Raiders OC job.
Much to Q's point, I agree. And I also look into the philosophy or try to go into philosophy of a man who comes from one position and is hired for another position. For example, you're hired as a head coach and you run a program for some time, have some limited amount of success, but do you take a sidestep and want to be a head coach at the next team, or do you want to take a step back? Because I do believe there are some guys who are better cut out for coordinators. Does that gentleman realize that, you know what, I'm probably better off as an offensive coordinator or a defensive coordinator rather than a head coach? With that being said, do you want somebody over your head giving you commands when you were that person in charge? So there's a lot of things that go into details about hiring a former head coach as an offensive coordinator or defensive coordinator. With that being said, I thought it was just it was standard terms because you were in that area. Why not interview somebody who was in that area? Why not interview for this situation, McDaniel's in that situation? Because you ask them, what would be your plan if for the Raiders? And we're going to talk extensively during the show. And Shantelle, you and I were talking about it before we started the show about the philosophy of hiring a guy. The Raiders, to me, are under a very, very small time slot. They've got to find their guy. They got to find their guy quick because shortly after the Super Bowl is played, you have a combine, and you got to start preparing for the draft. You got a lot of work to do. So if whomever you hire, if he's going to bring in his own staff, he's got to do it. And we see a lot of these other jobs being taken up because they already have pieces in place for the Raiders. Now, the Raiders are a rebuild. Do you hire a guy who's rebuilt a program before? Or do you hire a guy who's fresh off of being a part of a program? These are all the questions that you have to answer. So there's a lot of intangibles that go into it. But I know this. Ultimately, there are some very alluring jobs that are still available, even though there have been some hires this past week.
I'll tell you what, the fact that the Raiders have interviewed as many people as they have, I love the approach, right? I mean, they've had 14 guys at least, right? 9 on offense and 5 on defense. That is so different from what we're used to seeing when it comes to a Raider head coaching search. We'll hear about a coach here, a coach there, interview here, interview there. All right, they're locked in on this guy. He's going to be the one. So the fact that they've gone all kind of different ways, right? Defense, offense, a guy who just got fired like Kevin Stefanski, a guy like Mike McDaniel, or even a guy who's like Davis Webb, who's only a quarterback coach, or Nathan Shieldhouse, who's only a passing game coordinator. You know, guys like that, to be able to have that kind of wide range of different people that you're talking to, I think that's good business. And I think the Raiders are going about it the right way.
Yeah, and just some other names also that we should mention that the Raiders have completed interviews with. Also, Joe Brady, Klay Kubiak, and they're also preparing for second interviews with Jesse Minter and Ejiro Evero. That's kind of an interesting one for me is the Panthers DC, Ejiro Evero. I don't know if he's completely ready to be a head coach in the NFL. I don't know like too much about him, but what are your guys' thoughts on Jesse Minter and Ejiro Evero? I feel like Jesse Minter's name has been thrown around a lot, but that might be a name that might head over to Baltimore because of his ties. But what are your thoughts on that, Link?
I think Jesse Minter is probably the stronger name out of the two that were comparative, only because you know, not necessarily what Carolina has been able to do over the last couple of years, and I'm not trying to slight their defense and what they've been able to accomplish. But as far as I still think the Raiders want to go offensive minded. I think it makes sense with them having the first pick, and I think we all agree here collectively on this panel that it's going to be Mendoza. With that being said, you need to have a vision about what you want to do with that quarterback as far as rebuilding a team. And I just don't know if a defensive coordinator who hasn't had limited amount of experience is that person to cut that, sort of rebuild that program or build that program, not rebuild it, build it.
Yeah, Jesse Minter's got the proof of concept. He's got the better name, obviously, between the two DCs that we're talking about. Jesse Minter has done it, at Michigan. Jesse Minter has done it in Baltimore. He's done it now with the Chargers. I mean, he's got the proof of concept. He's going to have multiple options. I'm like Link. I think that Baltimore or even Pittsburgh could be a good landing spot for him if, in fact, he does get hired, and I do believe he'll get hired this cycle. But I do think that they end up with the offensive-minded head coach for every reason that Link just pointed out. I just think it makes all the sense in the world. But again, to be able to interview as many different candidates as possible and get their thoughts and get their philosophies. And remember this is something I've been saying for a while. It's not just the candidate, kind of selling themselves to the Raiders. The Raiders also have to sell themselves to the candidate. And what I mean by that is they have to tell them, hey, this is not going to be what it's been the last handful of years. This is not going to be one and done. We're not going to run you out of town. We're going to allow you to have time to grow. This is also a selling process for the Raiders. They have to do that. They've put themselves in a position where you don't look at it. You don't look at them like the Steelers. Oh yeah, you go in there and you do your job. You're going to be straight. You're going to be there for however many years, or Baltimore, or, even Buffalo. Like they had Sean McDermott for 9 seasons. Right. And so they're not going to be able to say that and just say, oh, trust us. You can't. The proof of concept's not there. So as much as the candidate is trying to sell themselves to the Raiders are trying to sell themselves to the candidate as well.
Yeah, and you mentioned the big name there, Sean McDermott. Now, this was a surprise for me that the Bills and Sean McDermott parted ways. Now, this is a coach that went 98-50, 9 seasons there in Buffalo. 8 out of those 9 seasons he made the playoffs, and I believe there was 5 straight AFC East titles. So lots of success. Is Sean McDermott a coach that you feel like the Raiders should pursue? And I asked this before when we talked about John Harbaugh and Mike Tomlin. Do you feel like that's similar to like a Pete Carroll link?
Yes, absolutely. I do. I think that, based on Sean McDermott, here's the thing. I went into this weekend's game because I said, bro, I thinking that if McDermott doesn't win, I thought he was going to get chopped. I thought he was going to get cut. And I thought that because we live in a society where it's what have you done for me lately? Mm-hmm. Based on that past success and what the Bills have done, they never got over the hump. Now, and albeit there was Kansas City there who's running a dynasty. And for all the Bills' success, especially in the 90s when I used to watch them, when they went to 4 straight AFC championship games, still never won a championship, I was pulling for the Bills.
Yeah.
Honestly, with Kansas City down, I was pulling for the Bills. I had predicted that it was going to be Buffalo and Los Angeles Rams in the Super Bowl. That's what I said, based on the way the season goes. Now, watching Josh Allen go out there and turn over the ball 4 times, 4 interceptions, that's not Sean McDermott's fault, but he's going to get the blame. And then seeing the press conference afterwards, Josh Allen's is cheerful. Oh my God, and all these little side stories. Oh my gosh, what a winner! You got to give this guy a chance. All that, and then McDermott gets the axe. Mm-hmm. Saying that, I believe McDermott, I believe Harbaugh, I believe Tomlin to be program builders. I believe Stefanski to be program builders. They might not have all the tools around them, might not have a competent general manager, might not made all the right decisions, but you get all the blame when things go right. You get all the blame, all the glory when things go right, all the blame when things go wrong. With that being said, I think McDermott would be ideal for the Raiders. But much to Q's point, and Shantelle, you and I talked about it, can the Raiders possibly lure somebody when they've had such a history of firing guys? Who wants to be hired to be fired?
Nobody. Nobody, right? Not to be Jim Harbaugh, but that's real. I mean, nobody wants that scenario, and that's real when it comes to the Raiders because you just don't know, right? I mean, the plan all sounds good and the 5-year deal looks good, but then all of a sudden a year into it, if things aren't going right and you get the axe, and we've seen it too many times. The fact that I've been here in Vegas since 2021 and the Raiders are going on their 6th coach and it's only 2026, the math don't math. Right. I mean, you do it. I don't need to be the mathematician to do it. The math doesn't math. It doesn't stack up right. They're not supposed to be hiring and firing like that. Right. In my whole lifetime, the Steelers have had 3 head coaches. Right. The Raiders have had 6 now in the last handful of years. So it's just the difference in organizations and the way that they've operated. So that's why it's so imperative that they get this right this offseason. They've got to be able to get the right hire. They've got to be able to make the right decisions when it comes to free agency and also the draft. They have to find a way to get this thing back on the right track. If not, this offseason, then when are they really going to have a realistic opportunity to do it, right? They have all the tools in front of them right now this year, so they got to figure out a way to get it done. I like Sean McDermott. I don't know if he's right for the job because I think this is going to be a slow build. I really do. And I know, and some people have gotten angry, like, well, how come the Raiders can't be one and done or one and turn it around in 1 year like some other organizations? I just think they have too many holes. I just think there's way too many holes. I think they need to stop trying to shortcut it and try to stop jumping to the front of the line and trying to find a cheat code. I think they just need to understand what it is and build this thing the right way. Take a page out of Kurt Signetti's book, and take a page out of Mario Cristobal's book, who was in the national championship game last night. Build this thing correctly from the inside out. Build it like championship teams are built, and you'll be fine. Again, you have to make the right decisions. It might be a little bit of a slow grind, especially year 1. But you can get it done. You gotta make the right calls, man. You really do, and you have to stop trying to shortcut it and, like I said, cut to the front of the line.
Obviously, we talked about Sean McDermott and how he might not be the perfect fit, but the one thing that he really was in Buffalo was a program builder. And we talk about being a program builder, and that's kind of what the Raiders need when you go for a newer coach. Say if we went for like Ejiro Evero, as the Raiders head coach. We're not knowing what his experience is. He's never been a head coach in the league. So in terms of what we've seen from Sean McDermott, and we've seen what he can do, especially with a young quarterback like Josh Allen, does that make him a little bit more enticing, Q?
I mean, I think that Brian Daboll or Joe Brady is more enticing, from Buffalo. If you're looking at Josh Allen, Brian Daboll is a guy who probably will end up getting that Buffalo job just because he's got the familiarity with Josh Allen, which you want to talk about falling up, right? I mean, he just got fired in New York, and all of a sudden he's probably going to land in Buffalo as the head coach of the Bills because he has that familiarity with the quarterback. And that's what it is. I mean, we all know the two most important positions in the game that's going to be, always talked about and tied at the hip are going to be the head coach and the quarterback. And so I think Josh Allen's going to have a lot of say in Buffalo's head coaching search. And I would not be shocked at all to see Brian Daboll get that job. And he's a guy that a lot of people talked about as being a potential OC this year. Well, all of a sudden he might be able to jump that OC position and go right back to being a head coach. Joe Brady, who the Raiders did interview on Sunday, I would have some interest in him. He's been a guy that was hot all the way back to LSU when they had that incredible run with Joe Burrow and company where they were putting up all kind of points. Like I think they just scored again right now. They were just scoring so much. He didn't do that well when he was in Carolina as Matt Rule's offensive coordinator, but nothing went well for Matt Rule and the Panthers that run. And then he got back on track now in Buffalo. And so I would be intrigued by any of these offensive minds. I just think that this is what the Raiders need, a young offensive dude, similar to what the Raiders did when they went and hired John Gruden, a young offensive sharp mind, tie him to the organization for some years, let him build his program. Obviously, Gruden went out and got a veteran quarterback in Rich Gannon, but I believe that with Mendoza and a young quarterback and a young head coach, I think they can grow this thing together.
And that's sort of the reason why, Shantelle and Q, that I'm leaning to a younger offensive-minded coordinator, because I do believe there's a different standard and a different type of athlete that's coming out of college these days, and especially the approach that Spytek is still fairly new as a general manager. So you're kind of building from the ground up. And look, with that being said, I would like a head coach to come in who has a plan. And I want a head coach, an offensive coordinator, a young offensive coordinator, say like the Klay Kubiak, who's come from a program where they've seen the ground building blocks to build a power, to build a future. I believe Mendoza is going to be the first pick in the draft. I think it's a no-brainer. And then you have a young, aspiring offensive mind that knows how to work with multiple tight ends, that knows how to work with the possibility of altering its view to get away from the norm and the old structure of what we've seen programs being built. That's why I'm more inclined to go with a younger, fresher mind to work with a fresher general manager, to work with a younger, fresher team and build a program from the ground up rather than going from somebody like a McDermott or a Harbaugh or a Tomlin who's established themselves. Not saying those guys don't have plans. I just don't know if they could have the patience, or Raider Nation would have the patience to stand behind someone as they build, coming from another program that was successful, like we're talking about with the older coaches.
Yeah, and I think the Raiders are going to commit to a full rebuild. In past years, they tried to rebuild on the fly, did not work, and this is the perfect time with the Raiders holding that number 1 overall draft pick. Speaking of that number 1 overall draft pick, coming up on the other side, we're going to get into the national championship, Fernando Mania, all of that. So keep it locked here on the Locked On Network. You're watching or listening to the Raiders Squad Show. If you ever hired someone who looked good on paper but wasn't the right fit, you know how important that is. When you want candidates who truly match what you're looking for, trust Indeed's sponsored jobs. Hiring, Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your post seen on other sites. Indeed's sponsored jobs put your post at the top of the page and help you reach the right candidates faster. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed are 90% more likely to report a hire than non-sponsored jobs. Spend more time interviewing candidates who check all your boxes with less stress, less time, and more results using Indeed sponsored jobs. Listeners of this show get $75 sponsored job credit to help give your job the premium placement it deserves at Indeed.com/LockedOnNFL. Just go to Indeed.com/LockedOnNFL right now and support the show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring, do it the right way. And we'll also hear from our other sponsors as well, as we got a couple of sponsors on today's show. This one is Robinhood. What if sports were traded like markets? Now you can put your sports IQ to work in real time with Robinhood prediction markets. It's not you against the house. It's you participating in a live market. You can buy or sell your positions live all game long. Use your sports knowledge in moments that matter. Robinhood prediction markets changes the game. It's people moving the action, so when the momentum shifts, you can move with. I always knew the game, but never had a dynamic way to apply that knowledge. Now I can actually take part live in a market powered by people. You are no longer just a spectator. Play by play, you decide. Trade every play with Robinhood, now available across the US. Download the Robinhood app now to begin. Welcome back, Raider Nation. Remember, if you like the content, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button. We also want to mention the Locked On Network is the #1 sports podcasting network. So we do appreciate your support and also your continued support with this show, whether you're watching on YouTube or finding it wherever you get your shows and podcasts for your audio. We do appreciate you. All right. So obviously we cannot not talk about Fernando Mania because obviously he won the national championship. He continues to impress. Now, this was a game that Indiana had a great season, right? Their defense balled out. They were a complete team, and they finished off the season undefeated, taking care of Miami 27-21. And it was really amazing just to see, I guess, for Fernando come up big in moments. Now, he didn't have a game where the stats just blew off the charts. And I think that might be the biggest conversation, is the fact that he didn't have those stats where people were like, oh my God, he's the #1 pick. And I think we're going to see this a lot throughout up until leading to the draft, is the fact that people are going to find little holes in his game. But I just want to first ask both of you, Link, what were your thoughts on what you saw from Fernando Mendoza?
I cringed when he had that 4th down run into the touchdown. The shots that he took. I was like, oh my God, don't hurt our freeze for #1. That's what I was worried about. But here's the thing. I don't necessarily take anything from Mendoza. I came into this game high on him. I didn't want it to be a one-shot wonder. I watched all his film in Indiana this past year. I watched his film from Cal. I had a collective brief. I saw the growth out of this young man to definitely warrant he should be the first pick in the draft. It's absolutely a no-brainer. But I will say this, based on last night's game, give credit to Miami's defense.
Absolutely. Yep.
Miami had a defensive plan that really startled the Indiana Hoosiers when they seemed to be just cakewalking into the national championship. They took away a lot of those quick throws. They made them hold on to the football. There were a lot more sacks in the second half. Give credit to that Miami defense. And that's what's on the game is total. And I've often said it. I don't care how offensive power you look. You come across a good defense, you're going to be nullified to a degree. But I do like the fact that he made good throws towards the end. He kept them in it. And when they needed a big play, he did that. And that's all you want out of your quarterback. It's a team game. I'm not going to, the fact is that Indiana wanted to expose their tackles to wide 9 rushers. And I was watching the game with my youngest son, Ty. And I said, when you have wide 9 rushers, run a draw up the middle. They did it with success.
Right.
Indiana made adjustments and did it with success. I mean, that's coaching and that's playing. You want to keep this wide 9. You want to keep all this wide defensive end. Well, I'm not going to warrant my tackles to have to pass protect against that, because when they did, they gave up a lot of sacks. Run the ball up the damn middle. And that's what they did when Miami wasn't expecting. So great job by Mendoza. He still is my #1 pick here in Shantelle. And more importantly, I credit this Indiana team for finding a way to win when the standards seem to be stacked against them in the second half.
There was nothing that he was going to do in that game on Monday that was going to make me change my mind and if I thought he was the quarterback for the Raiders or not. But with that being said, what he did, and when they had to have it in stone cutting time, and the play that he made, even though it was one of those hold your breath moments because he just dove, but his willingness to do it and his willingness to put his body on the line when the team needed it the most, that is what stood out to me. We haven't seen that. I've said this many times, and this is not a slight whatsoever, but I think Fernando Mendoza will be the best quarterback that the Raiders have had since 2016 Derek Carr, before he broke his ankle, because Derek was willing to give up his body. He was willing to, run and use his athleticism that he had, until he broke that ankle, which I get that's a hell of an injury to come back from, but he was never the same after that. Fernando Mendoza at this stage of the game in his career is willing to give it up. He's willing to, take a hit. And look, Miami had a plan. Miami had an X on his back. Said, look, we're going to hit this dude early and often. They got away with the targeting call. Should have been that call when he got drilled in the chin. He was bloodied. His lip was all bloodied. I mean, he was beat up. But at the end of the day, Indiana won. His stat line wasn't fantastic, right? He didn't even have a touchdown pass, but he did have that touchdown run that was huge late in the fourth quarter. Look, Indiana's a really good team. There's a reason why they went 16-0. There's a reason why they had another punt block, and this one resulted in a touchdown. Their defense is sound. There was a lot of dudes watching that game that are going to play on Sundays. If you're just really locking in, you'll realize. And Miami had a defensive line that is no joke, right? Nothing to shake a stick at. What Mario Cristobal has done in Miami in a short amount of time to get that university back into the national championship game and get them back to where they're excited about their program again is, like I said, nothing to shake a stick at. That was a great game last night. You knew that there was no way Miami was just going to roll over in their own stadium, in their own locker rooms, and act like that they didn't deserve to be there. They were going to test and push Indiana, but every time they've been tested and pushed, whether it was Penn State, whether it was Ohio State, whether it was Miami last night, they've answered the call, right? One way, one how, they found a way to get it done. So I just like Fernando Mendoza's leadership, his willingness to do whatever it took to get the dub, and they got it done.
And I think that's really important. He made the throws that he had to make. He put his body on the line when he had to on the 4th and 5. Like, he did what he had to do to help his team win. My only question to either of you is, what do you think his ceiling is? Like, we make a lot of comparisons. What do you think Fernando Mendoza's ceiling is? I'll give Q. We'll go with you first.
I mean, he could be Jared Goff. He could be Matt Ryan-ish. He could be Kirk Cousins-ish. I mean, he could be, any of those guys. I hate to put a label on a guy. I just think that he's a really good quarterback. Accuracy. I think he's got intelligence that's off the chart. I mean, there's a reason why the guy was going to go to Yale, right? I mean, I just think that there's a lot of intangibles that he has that you're going to really like as a quarterback. And let's make no mistake about it. I don't know what Tom Brady's going to do as far as building this team and helping, just stack this roster and go through football operations like Mark Davis has said. But I know one thing, he can get in the lab with Fernando Mendoza and teach him some of the tricks to the trade. And with Mendoza looking up to Brady and that being his favorite, player of all time and growing up watching Brady, I think that's a match just waiting to happen.
I've always thought you can't coach hard. You either have it or you don't.
Yep.
What I saw from him in that game last night, resiliency, effort to still keep his team on top, took a lot of shots. Like I said, I cringed on that 4th down when he ran the ball in. The shots that he took, especially when he went airborne and took that shot in the back, it hurt me. And I was sitting on my chair in my living room. I was like, ooh. I mean, but he got up and he still kept on ticking. He still kept on going. Of course, when you look at the game and managing the game, when they needed it most, when they were backed up and Miami seemed to have them in a corner, he made the right throw. He made the right read. He made the right timing. He had teammates help to do that. But you can't coach that. So when you talk about the ceiling, anything is possible. Look,
right.
We as Raider Nation fans just want this team to win.
Exactly.
And you think that you have other pieces in place. Well, you might need a receiver, but you've got a running back. You've got tight ends. You've got some players on defense. You might need a philosophy. Overall, we just want them to win, and you need a leader to do that. And because the focal point when it comes to football, especially on the field, is the quarterback, that's the most valuable player.
Right.
So this is not hard. This is not a hard guess. You know that Mendoza is going to be your number 1 pick, and you know that the ceiling is absolutely phenomenal because we just want you to turn the program around.
But see, the thing about it is he could be a great quarterback, but you have to do right by him as an organization, right?
Just like Indiana did right by him,
exactly right? You need to get a bunch of Lincoln Kennedys. You need to get a bunch of Steve Wisniewski's, right? You need to get a bunch of those hoggies, as he likes to call them, on the offensive line.
Yeah.
Protect him. Don't put him out there on an island by himself. Look, you saw what Miami did. Yeah. Now, don't make no mistake about it. Indiana has a really good offensive line, and Miami said, we're going to wreck this game. And they did. And they are very physical, and they made it life difficult. Look, Indiana ran the rock 45 times. 45 times. They only averaged 2.9 yards per carry, right? Because Miami made it that difficult, but they were persistent. They stuck with the ground game anyway. They said, we're going to keep on doing it. We're not going to just abandon it like the Raiders did so many times throughout the course of the year. They didn't do that. They didn't abandon it. But they also showed that offensive line needs to be in the proper position. They need to be properly put together for Fernando Mendoza to have an opportunity, and that goes for any quarterback. You need an offensive line. You can't have Fernando Mendoza, whether he starts this next year or if he comes in 4 or 5 games into it, you can't have him getting hit and sacked 45 times, 50 times like Geno Smith did. Nobody's going to succeed. That offensive line has to be priority number 1 the minute that free agency opens up.
I recall a time back in, I think it was, what year was that? I want to say it was 99. We were down to the Jets. And Rich Gannon was our quarterback. And I remember that game for Rich, the effort that he showed me at quarterback convinced me that I needed to go the extra mile and block for him and do better by him. I saw that last night with Indiana's offensive line. You talk about their left tackles, really good players going to be playing in the league, and their center obviously were two of the standouts on that offensive line. But this was a solid offensive line that was exposed to the elements in the sense where you had guys like Bain and the other guy from Miami, the defensive end, coming off from wide nines. I played against Jason Taylor. I know what he coached. And I played against wide nines and had just a straight arrow shooting point to a shotgun quarterback or a pistol quarterback. And it's hard for the tackle to get on that island and protect without turning your shoulders and shorten the corner. I say that to say this. The effort that Mendoza put in, the effort that the offensive coordinator put in to this offensive line by saying, much to Q's point, we're still going to run the ball. We're still going to stay true to who we are. Shows confidence in the offensive line, makes these guys play harder.
Yep.
Makes these guys want to go through the extra step. That's what the Raiders need. They might not have all the pieces right now. It might not be there. Yes, they're going to find to the offensive line. But there also comes a time where you can't coach hard. And if you got a guy that's behind you that you know is a winner, you're going to do that extra.
Yep.
Whatever it takes. Whatever it takes to build a winner around him. And that's why it's not even a question in my mind that the Raiders need to go with Mendoza and a quarterback. He's a quarterback for the future in the Raiders.
Yeah, and so right now we're hearing a lot of, I guess a lot of people are looking at holes in Mendoza's game. So one thing that I really saw on Twitter last night was the fact that Indiana ran a very heavy RPO offense. And they were just like, listen, they ran RPO way too much. Fernando Mendoza, are we really getting a look at him? Because in the NFL, it's not obviously going to be like that. Is there any concern, Q, when you hear something like that?
No,
when
because
you see something like that?
No, not at all. I'm assuming that the coaches are going to understand what he does really well. And if the Raiders do, in fact, decide to go ahead and draft him, their responsibility as a coaching staff and as an organization is to make sure you have a plan. You know exactly how you're going to use this young man. You're going to put him in the best position to succeed. You're not going to take him and say, all right, I want him to fit in with what I want to do. No, you have to be able to, and this is why I think that Klay Kubiak in Seattle is going to be a good option and probably the leader in the clubhouse. And again, that's just my gut feeling when it comes to the Raiders head coaching job. You've seen him be able to adapt to different style of quarterbacks, whether it was when he was in Minnesota, whether it was when he was in New Orleans, or now in Seattle. Like he's had 3 different style quarterbacks that he's worked with, and he's been able to get the most out of them. Right. So I think that he's going to be able to look at Mendoza and say, okay, this is what you do really well. This is your accuracy. This is your between the ears that you have, your athleticism that you have. Okay, this is what we're going to do. This is how I'm going to, make the most out of your opportunity and your abilities. That's what the Raiders' responsibility as an organization is going to be. And so many times they've tried to grab a guy, draft a guy, and put him into what they want. All right, well, this is what we want you to do. I know this isn't what you necessarily do, but this is what we're going to want you to do. You got to stop doing that. You got to get out of that rut or whatever that is, that bad habit that a lot of teams have. They've got to be able to identify. So during these interviews, it should be, okay, Fernando Mendoza, #1 overall pick. How do you utilize him? What is your plan for him? And that's part of the interview process.
I see a lot of quarterbacks in today's game, pro game, being able to adjust on the fly, which I respect. One thing I appreciate about Mendoza is he's smart. He's shown that he's intelligent. And I would like for him to have a system to where he had the ability to audible. Yep. Whether it's a check with me system where they go in a huddle and they call 2 plays and then you see the quarterback saying, can, we're going with the second play and all that other stuff. And the offense unanimously knows it. Or you have a quarterback like Rich Gannon was with me. We had an audible system in place. You come up, you don't like the defense, we got an audible check. And everyone was on the same page. Right. Because these stadiums have been more glamorous and it's harder to hear down in there, it makes sense to go with a check with me system. It makes sense to go with an RPO option, those types of systems. Not necessarily conducive to the length of the longevity of the quarterback, in my opinion, because we saw with that RPO system how Mendoza took a shot last night that should have been called targeting. It should have been a personal foul, especially in the mouth. But I don't ever want to put my quarterback in harm's way. And when RPO systems first came out, I said, if I was a defensive coordinator, I would tell my defensive end to have that option every single time you saw that quarterback hit his ass in his goddamn jaw. Excuse my language. I get a little carried away with those things. But that's what happens when you expose a quarterback to that type of situation. So I've never been a fan for the RPOs. But I do want a quarterback who's intelligent enough to go and see, this offensive play is not conducive to what the defense is showing me, and have the ability to make a check. to make an audible, to do something different, or at least have that relationship with his would-be offensive coordinator to say, okay, there's a couple of options. If they show this, we're running 2 plays. This is what you do because this is their tendencies. You need a smart man who has it up here to understand that and to be able to convey that to his teammates and then show that it works. And I think Mendoza's that guy.
And listen, I think consensus here on the Raiders Squad show is that the Raiders should draft Fernando Mendoza.
Right.
One thing that everyone had their eyes on was the fact that Mark Davis was there, John Spytek was there, and Tom Brady was there. Seeing that at the national championship, how much do you think that it means that Fernando Mendoza is a lock for the Raiders, Link?
I think it's a lock. I think because it's a no-brainer. But, seeing the 3 powers that be in Miami, I know that Brady has a house in Miami, so they're all hanging out at Brady's house. Makes sense.
I mean, I don't want to say anything's a lock in January just because you never know how things are going to play out. And the fact that, you're going to hear the combine, you're going to, go through all the process. And like you said, Shantelle, everyone's going to, try to pick his game apart. And I had people texting me last night, he's no better than the 3rd round pick. That's just how it's going to be, right? There's going to be so many different analysts that are going to have their opinions and say, what they think about him and where his areas are going to fail and why he's going to fail. Just got to kind of let that ride and get to April. I do believe that he's going to be the pick. I just think that it's hard to say that anything's a lock right now in January, just because you never know. Think be a team that somehow gets so desperate that they're like, look, we just want this dude really badly, and this is what we're going to give you. And maybe they go in that direction. I don't think that that's going to happen. But again, until it really plays out, we never know. The NFL is a wild entity, man. You just never know what's going to happen. The fact that there was 10 head coaching openings and vacancies this past cycle tells you all that you need to know. A lot of times, things don't they don't shake out the way that you thought. I mean, Tomlin, Harbaugh, and McDermott all out in the same cycle. Come on, who would have told me that at the beginning of the season?
Plus we also live in a time where these players, it's not a given that these players are going to want to accept the terms that the NFL brings to them. I mean, when you think about it, I looked at some of these college rosters. The average age of some of these college rosters that were making a championship run were 24 years old.
That was Indiana.
I mean,
Indiana they were old.
24 years old.
Yeah.
I mean, I saw 7-year seniors on rosters. I'm like, are you?
But
this
Trinidad
is
what Trinidad Chambliss gets denied his extra year of eligibility. He's like, I hate the NCAA. They're so inconsistent when it comes to that.
And with that being said, we go back to I'm reminded about what happened with Phillip Rivers and Eli Manning.
Yeah.
When you had players that just, I'm not going to go there. I'm not going to be a part of that team. And it's unfortunate because the fondness that I have towards the organization and the history of the organization, they're in a position that way where you might have people that are in whomever's ear chiming. You don't want to go there. You don't want to go there. It's a disaster. It's a disaster. It's a mix.
I think that's why Dante Moore was like, I'm going back to college. I don't want to be part of the Jets.
Exactly. And that's what I'm saying. I mean, that's what you have. And I worry about all the intangibles when it comes to what we think is for sure. Before I got on the Mendoza bandwagon, I was like, well, there's possibilities you might want to trade back if he's not your guy. I don't know what the evaluation of John Spytek and his staff are. To me, there are certain things that you don't have to glamour over or lose too much sleep over. But they're in a position where they've got to find a head coach. They've got to find an offensive coordinator. They've got to find a lot of pieces when it comes to the draft or free agency. There's a lot of evaluating that has to be done. I'd like to take one less decision off their hands by saying that, okay, just go for sure for Mendoza. But this is not a guarantee that Mendoza wants to be a Raider.
Right. No, that's real. I think that he would love to because Brady's in the organization.
Okay.
I think that's going to be the difference maker. Like if I had the opportunity to work with my, the guy that I looked up to, coming up my whole life, if I had the opportunity to work with him hand in hand, side by side, I think that would be a game changer for me. A lot of people are talking about, well, Mendoza hasn't even declared yet because he does have another year of eligibility. Well, his brother did. His brother declared that he's going to hit the transfer portal. So that kind of, if you want to put the tea leaves together, I know he hasn't, formally declared for the league yet, but I mean, his brother wouldn't leave if he was coming back to Indiana. Let's put it like that. His brother would still be kicking it with him. So,
but much to your point, Q, much to your point about Brady and stuff like that, we still have to involve the entire picture when it comes to our evaluation process. Because to me, I could never foresee if my son was the first pick, possibly the first pick in the draft, to even tell him you don't want to go to that team. You're the first pick in the draft. I don't care what team you go to. That's just me.
Yeah, no,
okay, that's just my thinking. You know what I'm saying? But these days, these kids, what's their motivation? when you're making six figures in college,
Right.
what's your motivation on the next level? That's one of the
Yeah,
reasons why I never went to get
they're not
coaching.
hungry no more.
You're not
Yeah.
hungry anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You've already achieved it. What being a first pick? Okay, well, there's been plenty of first picks that have succeeded. There's also been plenty of first picks that have failed. What's my motivation?
I always say that about rappers. Their first album is always the great album, right? When they're still hungry. Then once they go platinum, then it's like, all right, now I can just put in 16 tracks and call it a day.
Like when you see a great movie and then they come out with the sequel and it's
Right.
you got to make a third one to make up for it, or a fourth one,
Facts.
and then all
Yep.
of a sudden you got a series like,
Yep.
okay, I'm bored. You know, that type of thing. So yeah, it's convoluted to say the least.
I'll say one thing though. I think for everyone that's saying that Fernando Mendoza might be a bust, way too early. We haven't even seen the kid on an NFL field. We have not seen that yet. Also, for people that are saying that his ceiling might be like a Kirk Cousins or a Matt Ryan. Matt Ryan was a good quarterback. He took his team to the Super Bowl. If Fernando Mendoza can be a top 15 quarterback in the league, I think that's a win for the Raiders.
Hell yeah.
So exactly. I mean, look at this past season, right? Look at this past season. So
look at the past handful of seasons. Look at all the quarterbacks they've recycled through since they sat Carr down.
Exactly. So, we'll find out what's going to happen, obviously, later on as, everything happens, the combine. We're going to have a lot of draft shows. We're going to have free agency shows, and we're going to see how the chips fall, especially after free agency and seeing who the Raiders go after. So we might have more of a clear picture, but we all do believe that the Raiders are probably going to go for Fernando Mendoza for that number 1 overall pick. But obviously that's not for sure because like you said, it is January. But keep it locked here on the Locked On Network because we're going to be talking about another quarterback that's been rumored or linked to the Raiders. Not sure why, but there's some rumors going around. And so we're going to talk about that on the other side. Keep it locked here on the Locked On Network. You're watching or listening to the Raider Squad Show. Kicking off the new year, feeling good is the goal, right? And honestly, hydration is the easiest way. When I stay on top of it, my energy, focus, and mood all level up. But let's be real. Plain water doesn't always cut it, especially when you're grinding through those long days, hitting the gym, or just trying to stay consistent with your health goals. That's where a DripDrop comes in. Doctor-developed, proven fast hydration that helps your body and mind work better. Thinking clearer, focus, better energy, elevated mood, and even that fresh skin glow. And DripDrop science-backed formula is trusted by firefighters, medical professionals, and over 90% of top college and pro teams because it rehydrates you faster and more effectively than water alone. Right now, DripDrop is offering podcast listeners 20% off your first order. Go to DripDrop.com and use promo code LOCKEDONNFL. That's DripDrop.com, promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Stock up now at DripDrop.com and use promo code LOCKEDONNFL. All right, welcome back, Raider Nation. Remember, if you like the content, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button. You can also follow us on our social media channels. And remember, in that final segment, Link and Q are going to be taking some of your questions and comments. That's coming up next. So if you're watching this on YouTube, please drop them in the chat. If you're listening to this, you can always drop them on our YouTube page later on, and we may be able to get to it on another episode. All right, so we got to talk about all the ridiculous rumors. I saw this on Friday night. So it's from a couple of days ago. And this was on Mike Florio and Michael Hawley's show on Pro Football Talk. And already. And they were talking about the fact that the Raiders and Tom Brady might be interested in trading for Lamar Jackson and even throwing in that number 1 overall pick. But because we're real journalists here and we like the context, we're going to play the audio first. And it's about an hour. It's about a minute and 30 seconds, not an hour. But we're going to hear what Mike Florio and Michael Hawley said, and we'll see if Link and Q agree.
There are some who believe, and this was in the Mike Preston column about the Ravens and Lamar Jackson, and I have a feeling that Mike Preston has heard the same kinds of things I've heard. There's a feeling out there that the Raiders are going to make a play for Lamar, that's the big splash. Offer the first overall pick in the draft for Lamar Jackson. Before that, they got to hire a coach. But, Tom Brady feels compelled to do something. It may not work, but just do something. It doesn't seem like they're doing anything. Last year, it was just kind of like rearranging the furniture. This year, people are expecting him to do something big.
Mike, if I'm that scenario, of offering the first pick for Lamar Jackson, if I'm the Raiders, I'd do that in a second, and I'll even throw something else in for you. Yeah, I like Mendoza a lot, and I like Indiana. I love the story and the turnaround, but I certainly would take Lamar Jackson over Mendoza. If it came to that, would you trade Mendoza for Lamar Jackson? Yes. The rights to Mendoza for the opportunity to have Lamar Jackson going into his 30s, even if you think that, hey, he won't be able to play until 40. Let's say he's like 35. Give me 5 or 6 years of Lamar Jackson. Absolutely.
When I heard that, I thought, man, these dudes must be smoking something crazy, because I thought that was wild. But I want to get both of your thoughts. Link, we'll go with you first. Do you agree with what Michael Hawley and Florio were saying there?
Hell to the no. I'm going to keep it simple, bro, sis. You already know me.
Keep it simple, stupid. Yeah, no, that's...
Yeah, I mean, it's hell to the no. The thing is that I've seen some good times out of Lamar Jackson, but I think he's taken some hellacious hits over his career. And I'm drawn back to not recently when I watched RG3, what he was able to do with then the Redskins and now the Commanders, his first year and early in his career, and the shots he took, and he was never the same after he had that injury coming back. I'm reminded of Derek Carr. He was never the same after he had that injury, and that wasn't on a scramble. But I've seen Lamar Jackson take some hits, and I do think he's past his prime in the sense where if you're going to make a trade for him of this magnitude, you're not going to get what you want on the other end. And you've got to have a system that's conducive to someone like Jackson's skill set. And that's a big change for where the Raiders are right now. That's a big adjustment. And I don't necessarily see that. So I am not enamored by any way by this pick. But besides that, what I learned from Russell Wilson during his career, when he was scrambling the first couple of years, what did Russell Wilson learn how to do? Slide, get out of bounds, use it to his advantage. Lamar's not doing that yet. And he's taking some injuries. He's had some injuries. So when it comes to a running quarterback, yes, I do believe today's game is warranted by a quarterback who can extend plays with his legs, but I don't want my quarterback running around. And also, I would throw this at Lamar Jackson. There have been times where I've seen him put in critical situations where he didn't come through. I was reminded about the game when he played against the Raiders and Max Crosby draw that fumble where the Raiders ended up winning that game against Baltimore.
Yep.
That was Lamar Jackson's fault.
Yep.
He was carelessly carrying the football, haphazardly carrying the football. So no, I would not even entertain this idea. And I'm not trying to make light of the situation. I know the Raiders are in a position where they need help, granted. And I'm saying Lamar Jackson is an MVP candidate and MVP player and has done that success. But hell to the no, I do not make that trade.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. And it's funny, you hear in that sound clip that you played, would you trade Lamar Jackson for Fernando Mendoza? Sure, right? You would make that trade on paper, just the two names, Lamar Jackson, Fernando Mendoza, because, again, he's a proven regular season MVP multiple times, right? 2 times, should have been 3 times. With that being said, I agree with Lincoln 100%. He's older. He's losing some of his superpower. You see how many games he missed this season. He hasn't come through clutch in the postseason yet when he's had multiple opportunities. I don't believe, and this is just my personal feeling, he has the greatest work ethic either. I don't think that's I don't think that's hard to see just by the play on the field. No, I think, and not to mention, you're not just trading for Lamar Jackson. You're also trading for his contract. Right, his contract is a lot of money, and by the way, he has to get a contract extension coming up in 2 years. Right. So that's going to be $60 million plus a year. He's not going to take less than Dak Prescott's making. So now, not only are you trading for an older quarterback, you're trading for a guy that's got wear and tear on his body. You're trading for a guy that has a huge contract and a bigger contract on the way. No, and look, you need to invest a lot of your money. I know people get tired of hearing that the offensive line needs investment, but it does. So you have to use a lot of your salary cap space that you have in building your team. You've got 22 free agents of your own this year. This team is going to look completely different in 2026. Like, everything is going to be overhauled and changed and a lot younger. So you've got to go through with a fine-tooth comb and decide who you're bringing back, and there won't be many that they bring back from this team. I can promise you that. They'll go out and they'll spend some money in free agency. They'll address the offensive line. There's no way that you have an opportunity to say, yeah, let's go ahead and make that kind of trade, take a rookie contract to a veteran contract, and one that's going to have to be extended in a couple years, if not next year. No, that's to Lincoln's point, that's a hell to the no.
Yeah, and the fact that Lamar is a little bit more injury prone now, we're talking about that big contract that's going to be coming up. Also, he has a no trade clause. So he would have to approve wherever he would get
I don't
traded
think
to.
something tells me he wouldn't mind Vegas. I ain't the smartest guy in the world, but I don't think that Lamar Jackson would have too much problems hanging out in Vegas. I'm just gonna throw that out there. Sure,
well, you would hope he would have an O-line though, right? So that's another thing. The Raiders are rebuilding. So I don't know if Lamar Jackson would want to leave Baltimore and come to the Raiders. But here's the thing. Are there any truth to these rumors? You guys feel like there's any truth? Because people are saying that Tom Brady wants to make a splash. And I'm using air quotes if you're listening to this. But do you feel like there's any truth to any of these rumors, Link?
Well, because you have the number 1 overall pick, you have the possibility of trying to build a team. Yeah, there's always going to be things that are going to float around. I'm waiting for the rumor that Aaron Rodgers is going to be a Raider. I'm waiting for all of that to come around, because anything is a possibility. But I also go back to the fact, I'm like, well, I know that Brady has some influence in John Spytek's evaluation and of talent, and he's help making these football moves. But I'm drawn to the conclusion, well, why would you have to make such a big splash if you're making some of these decisions for a way to where you're going to take on all of the points that Q and I have made just to be viable for a short period of time? Right. Because with this offensive line, if they don't address this offensive line, he's not going to be able to play the first month of football. Right. He's going to take some hits. And if you look at what just happened to Geno Smith, if you don't address this offensive line, which I know they will do, but I'm just saying because if it was I'd be drunk right now. But the fact is that if you don't do this, how are you going to go forward? How are you going to possibly build a future? And that's what the Raiders need. They need an actual true building. If they're going to go younger, then go younger. Keep it simple, Sam. You
want to know how to make a splash? Go out and win some games.
True story.
I mean, you don't have to make a splash, right? I mean, it's always going to be, and some of the talking heads out there, they make it easy to just kind of throw something against there. Well, what if Tom Brady decided he's going to go and trade for Lamar Jackson? Like that's this time of year, right? In January, it's this time of year where there's those kind of side conversations. The Raiders, you put their name into any rumor or you attach any player to that organization, that rumor becomes that much bigger. I've been saying it for years that you'll hear coaches attached to the Raiders all the time. It just makes the conversation that much more. Raider Nation is a very passionate bunch. So as soon as anyone sees Raiders, they're going to gravitate to it and they're going to pay attention to it and they're going to read it and take it. Mike Florio don't give a rip about the Raiders, right? So he's out there saying whatever he says just to say it. And then I'll see him in San Francisco at the Super Bowl. Hey, Q, what's happening? And he'll be cool and everything and want to come on the show, and I'll probably entertain him just to do it. And it is what it is, right? But it's one of those things, like they always are going to attach the Raiders name to something. Remember how much we heard about Brian Flores and Brian Daboll were going to be the 1-2 punch for the Raiders head coaches? We heard that before Pete Carroll got fired.
Right.
We heard that before Pete Carroll got fired. We were at Allegiant Stadium week 18, and everyone's talking about, man, Brian Flores is going to be the head coach with Brian Daboll as the OC. Man, what do you think about that? I haven't heard a word about Brian Flores or Brian Daboll since Pete Carroll got fired. That was the day after the season ended.
Just rumors. But obviously we had to talk a little bit about it.
All right, here we go. Sorry. Flashback.
No. But I feel like more of these rumors will obviously come through
all the time.
As we're in the offseason.
Especially with the number one. Look, the other thing is right now with the Raiders having the number 1 overall pick, it's kind of boring because we all just assume that it's going to be Fernando Mendoza. So there's no kind of storylines. There's no villains. There's no other guy. There's no could they go Dante Moore? No, they can't. He went back to school. You know what I mean? So there's no Andrew Luck, RG3. There's no Marcus Mariota, Jameis Winston. There's no, Peyton Manning, Ryan Leaf. You know what I mean? There's nobody to pin against Fernando Mendoza right now. So it's like, all right, well, hold on, Sam. What can we come up with today? Oh, I know. Tom Brady wants to make a big splash. He's going to go trade the pick and go get Lamar Jackson. Like, come on, what are we doing? That's also the product of this type of year.
Yeah, sometimes it's just like rage bait. You know what I mean? I was like, this is like one of the dumbest rumors I've heard. But nonetheless, on the other side, questions and comments with Link and Q. So if you're watching this on YouTube, get your questions or comments in the chat right now. We'll read them on the other side. Keep it locked here on the Locked On Network. You're watching or listening to the Raider Squad Show. As the new year gets going, a lot of people are trying to simplify their routines, and dinner is a big one. Between busy work days, cold winter nights, and packed schedules, having an easy, reliable dinner plan makes a huge difference. That's where Home Chef comes in. Home Chef takes the stress out of cooking by delivering fresh, pre-portioned ingredients right to your door with easy to follow recipes that actually taste great. They're rated #1 by their users of other meal kits for quality, convenience, value, taste, and recipe ease. And it's easy to see why. Meals come ready to fit your schedule, 30-minute recipes, oven-ready trays, or quick lunches. For a limited time, Home Chef is offering my listeners 50% off your first box, free shipping, and free dessert for life. Just go to homechef.com/locked-on. That's one word. That's homechef.com/locked-on for 50% off your first box, free shipping, and free dessert for life. Must be an active subscriber for the free dessert. All right, welcome back, Raider Nation. If you like the content, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button. We're in that final segment where it's questions and comments with Link and Q, and we got a ton of good questions today. We'll go over to a good friend of the show, the Space Beast, who also donated to the show. He said, Q and Link, who is each of your 3 top head coaching candidates? We'll go with you first. We'll go with you first, Q, because Link just threw his head back.
Yeah.
So we're going to give Link.
Give me a moment. Give me a moment.
Klay Kubiak, #1. From the Seattle Seahawks, the offensive coordinator. Davis Webb from Denver, option #2, and I would have to go with the LaFleur. So Mike LaFleur, #3 from the LA Rams. How about that?
I like that.
Ditto.
I mean, that would be the easiest way to do it. I mean, what I will say, there are 2 names that definitely I agree with, and I agree with Kubiak and LaFleur. And the main reason why I like LaFleur more so is because coming out of that McVay offense, he understands how to use multiple tight end sets. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a Raiders' strength right now. Sure. Of course, they're going to address the offensive line, but I do think you need to utilize the strength that the Raiders have at tight end and make them a viable part. So I think that 12 and 13 personnel can work. And I want to have a coach who has a little bit of an understanding of how to make that go. You're not totally revamping what you have on offense. So that's why, to me, LaFleur stands out most.
You know, I also have to acknowledge that the tweet from AFL Godfather, and I still do not know exactly who that is. I know that there's someone in the building of the Raiders organization, and I know that they know me, and I'm sure I know them. Like, I've had conversations with them. I just don't know that that's their Twitter handle. During the Rams game, I tweeted out that Raider Nation was going to have to wait another week for their head coach. And so I'm assuming, and that's just an assumption, take it for what it's worth, I'm assuming that means that they're leaning towards someone either in Seattle or someone in Denver. But again, that's just me reading a tweet and thinking out loud, putting the 2 together.
And I believe that, but it's also, you're playing a very dangerous game because you talk about the AFC championships coming up this week, and then you got another 2 weeks for the Super Bowl to be played. If you're waiting to after the Super Bowl, there are still some jobs out there. Some sexy jobs out there. You might not, unless you have that lure or maybe that under table wink handshake agreement. Right. You might not have your coach, and you're playing a very dangerous game because the combine is immediately right after that.
Immediately after, absolutely.
So if your head coach comes into where he's going to be able to make some personnel decisions, well, now you've got to get him on board, what he has on the roster, evaluate the talent that's possibly coming out. And I think, we're sitting here saying that Mendoza is a surefire pick, but you still have, 9 other picks to go with that draft. Right. You still have a countless capital to spend in the free agency market. So it's a very dangerous game to still have your possible head coach candidate in coaching the game right now.
And again, the tweet came out during the Rams game. So I'm assuming that they were talking about teams that had already advanced. The Rams hadn't advanced yet. So that's why I'm not putting the Rams in that category. The tweet came out after Seattle had already advanced, after Denver had already advanced. The Rams were still in a dogfight trying to win their game. So that's why I assume that it's just an assumption, and it could mean nothing at all. I'm just going off of recent history with that Twitter account that I know comes from somewhere in the building. Link, it might be you.
It might be Link's burner.
I don't want it. I'll tell
you what, brother. That has been one of our biggest mysteries. Everyone that covers the team will stand there on the sideline. We'll see a tweet from AFL Godfather, and it'll be like a picture of practice. And I'm looking around. I'm like, okay.
Who is that?
They just took a picture. Like, they literally just took. I'm standing in the same room when the coaches get introduced in the big theater room. They're like, someone will tweet me, Q. AFL Godfather just tweeted something from the same room that you're in right now. He's got to be there. I was like, I know he's there. I've probably talked to him. He's probably sitting right next to me. I just literally don't know who it is. We've exchanged DMs before, back and forth. I got a whole DM thread between me and him.
I've always had an idea who it is. We'll talk about it. I've always had an idea who it is.
Okay, well, there you go. So
we'll talk. We can't share it. I want to share it. Exactly.
All right, we'll go to Darth Jader. Do we just get a bridge coach for now? I would think Carroll was supposed to be the bridge coach until we got the one coach to coach them all. Would you guys be okay with the bridge coach for now?
No.
Ditto. We'll keep that one short. One more really quickly. This one coming from Jose Diaz, 5646. Can we sign Khalil Mack for a 1 or 2 year deal to help Max? Would you want to bring Mack back?
Should have never let him go in the first place.
Facts. That part. Yeah. I mean,
That's
look,
simple.
if he's still got some burn, right, depending on how much it's going to cost, you definitely want to get, Max as much help along that defensive line. Ultimately, you've got to find a young dude that can be the Robin to Max's Batman.
Yeah.
Maybe even eventually be the Batman. You got to. Khalil's going to be good for what, a year, 2 years possibly. That's good for right now. But again, you're going to have to continue to build this thing. And I think John Spytek really wants to go as young as possible with some dudes that are really talented. And again, if you look at that game that was played last night, there was a bunch of Sunday players in that. I'll throw one name out there from Indiana, the cornerback, D'Angelo Pons. My man is only 5'9". He's about 175 pounds, maybe 180 if he's soaking wet. But the dude plays big. He plays like an absolute dog. I don't know what round he's going to go. Second, third round, whatever. I would definitely keep my eye on him because I think he's the kind of guy that has a tenacity that would fit perfectly with the Raiders, especially the style of defense that they like to run.
I would never turn down a future Hall of Famer, the possibility of playing in your team, but should have never let Khalil go in the first place.
Facts.
No, I agree. I'm actually still not over it. But coming up on Thursday, we'll be back. Raider Nation, of course, we'll give you all of our coaching updates. And if anything breaks, we'll be here for you. But I think we'll find out a little bit more when more coaches get eliminated from the playoffs. I think once the playoffs are done, that's when the Raiders are finally going to announce their head coach. But obviously, we'll have updates for you. So we'll be back on Thursday morning. Keep it locked here on the Locked On Network for some more updates. Thanks so much for rocking out with us on this Tuesday morning, and we'll see you on Thursday.